Hello, I'm Ronald Day, Associate Vice President of the David Rothenberg Center for Public Policy, and welcome to Both Sides of the Bars, a discussion-driven show that examines the criminal justice system from various perspectives, including from those most impacted by the criminal justice system. We discuss critical questions about how the current system works, its intersection with social justice, and highlight the efforts that are being made to improve the lives of everyone that is affected by it. We ask you, the viewer, to spread the word about Both Sides of the Bars and to share your comments with us on Twitter at The Fortune Society. Today we have two really great guests with us. One, Sebastian Solomon, who works for Legal Action Center. The other, Abdul Lloyd Bey, who's an attorney and professor, going to share their particular credentials with you. So Sebastian right now is the Director of State Policy at the Legal Action Center. Sebastian started with the Legal Action Center in 2001 as a research associate, as well as supporting LAC's HIRE, which stands for Helping Individuals with Criminal Records Re-Enter through Employment Network. Sebastian is also currently one of the rotating co-chairs of the Coalition of Reentry Advocates, which is a really great program, a coalition of organizations from around the state that work to change New York's laws. And he's also responsible for the organization's communications outlets, including press communication and social media. Thank you, Sebastian, for being with us today on Both Sides of the Bars.
Thanks for having me.
And also Abdul Lloyd Bey, who's an attorney, an author, professor, and he's also one of the Fortune Society's board members. Teaches at CUNY, right, at Hostos, and he'll tell you more about his teaching experience. He's also a publisher and a writer. He wrote a book called No Throwaway Boy, and he served as the director of Medgar Evers College's Youth Services and the director of the National Youth Sports Program. And Abdul was incarcerated himself for 13 years, or 12 and a half years, excuse me. And during this time, he earned a GED and also was a literacy coach certification, or he earned a literacy coach certification, and he used his opportunity there to help other incarcerated individuals overcome literacy and obtain their GEDs. So thank you, Abdul, for being with us today on Both Sides of the Bar.
Thanks for having me.
So we're talking about the landscape of criminal justice system post-election.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty scary for folks who have been working on criminal justice reform, not just for years, but for decades, considering, you know, the election and what might potentially happen. So, I mean, there are a number of issues, right? We have funding that usually comes through the Second Chance Act. There has been bipartisan support in Congress, right, for this particular funding. It has provided a resource for organizations around the country to offer reentry services to people transitioning from jails and prisons to the community. There's also educational programs that the funding has supported. There are initiatives like Ban the Box, which, you know, removes the question about people's convictions, that allows, you know, a more level playing field for them to be able to get jobs. So it's up in the air about what's going to happen going forward with respect to a lot of the policies that were enacted over the last 8 years or so ago. So, you know, why don't we start with you, Sebastian? We know healthcare is also something with the Affordable Care Act. We have people that are transitioning from facilities to the community that get health care through the Affordable Care Act, and there are millions of other folks who also get it. So how do, you know, there are discussions happening, what are people talking about with respect to what might happen now with health care for this particular population?
Thanks. So it's really scary. You know, as we know, the criminal justice system has high rates of substance use disorders and mental health issues. And over the last 8 years, with the passage of the Affordable Care Act and the requirements that they cover substance use disorder and mental health services at parity, and the expansion of Medicaid, we've really seen a change in how these conditions get treated. Additionally, the Obama administration really made a big push for the use of Medicaid to help the people who are involved in the criminal justice system, getting people who are incarcerated enrolled into Medicaid. So that's been a huge step. And so the last thing is that the ACA created this huge incentive to treat this population because of the 90% match for people who are not previously, the feds are paying 90% of the cost of Medicaid for people who are not previously covered. So all of that in this new world could be at risk. And while we've also seen greater interest and awareness of addiction and mental health as conditions, and we've and a lot of positive legislation, and those have been bipartisan. So hopefully those will stick around. But we really don't know. But I mean, I think the main thing is this really changed the ability for people when they come out of prison to get the care they need, and with possible repeal, end of this expansion of Medicaid, no more certainty that they would cover addiction in the same way. All those things, we have no idea what's going to happen with those.
So we might be right back at square one, where people find it extremely difficult to get the care that they need for some conditions that we know can potentially, lead to one's incarceration. Absolutely. Or have a significant impact.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, the good news is that we've seen in recent years bipartisan support for addiction coverage, including which at our office we're really excited about, awareness about the importance of medication-assisted treatment. And so there is this new funding. There's funding this year. There's recently that came in that was for $500 million over 2 years, $1 billion over 2 years for addiction treatment, and new legislation to protect, and they includes all sorts of positive things. But without the health insurance, you're really creating a huge dent in what the safety net is. And the last thing I want to say is another thing that has sometimes come up in Congress is addiction has additional protections in terms of information about the people getting treatment. And some people on the Republican side at times have expressed desire to remove those protections. The problem is addiction is one of the only types of health conditions where just having it can result in incarceration, can result in losing your kids, losing your job, all that kind of stuff, and so it's really important that we believe that it's really important that those protections remain.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Sebastian. One of the things that is concerning as well is with the bipartisan support for criminal justice reform, we've been moving away from mandatory sentencing, Abdul, and from imposing really harsh penalties, because we know that these lengthy sentences haven't necessarily made communities safer. And one of the things that often happens is we know about solitary confinement. Under the Obama administration, there was a move away from it. For example, with juveniles in the Bureau of Prisons and even with some adults. New York State recently signed off on an agreement to reduce solitary confinement. So you have some experience there, Abdul. Tell us about your take on this particular issue.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of issues going on right now that's really up in the air. Yeah. We don't know what direction this is going to go in terms of criminal justice reform overall. There is a bipartisan movement in this country, or there has been, to make sure that some of the issues are addressed. And with this new administration coming in, we don't know what direction this thing is going to go. I think that the issue of mandatory sentences, the issue of mass incarceration, the explosion of the prison system, we really just don't know what direction this thing is going to go. So I think everybody has to be vigilant and really take steps to make sure that these issues are front and center, because with this new administration coming in, we don't know how informed he's going to be. We don't know what addresses he's going to have for us, and it's interesting. Yeah. I think we should take notice.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say is we don't want to go backwards, because we've already been able to determine that certain things don't work. And one of the things that I mentioned a second ago was solitary confinement. There's a significant amount of evidence about the harm that's done to people who reside in solitary confinement.
Right.
And Abdul, you mentioned that while you were inside, you spent some time there.
Right.
And won't you share your experience with us, because the last thing that, again, we want to do is be going in a direction for which we'll be perpetuating harm rather than doing good.
Well, I was pleased to hear that the issue of solitary confinement had taken a national discussion, and the Obama administration had said that they were going to make some moves to kind of ban the solitary confinement, particularly for juveniles. Solitary confinement is known to cause a lot of issues for those people who are sentenced there. And then when you talk about young people, solitary confinement is a place where you put I mean, just imagine being locked in 23 hours a day in a place the size of your bathroom and just basically left there. I mean, we're social creatures. And a lot of times people are sent there for really minor offenses. These are not for major offenses. And then the length of time that people are being left there, the psychological effects, from a personal perspective, you know, I've witnessed people just mentally break down, you know, mentally deteriorate. It impacts their sense of reality. People start talking to themselves, talking about people who are strong, sane. You can just watch the deterioration. Next thing you know, they're on medication, and then they come back into population. And I think Sebastian talked earlier about the mental health, and now you have a mental health issue on top of the issue that you had originally with this person. So again, I don't know what direction this new administration is going to go with solitary confinement, but I'm hoping that people really take a look at that, because it's doing so much damage to so many people that it really has to stay front and center.
Yeah. And Sebastian, what about, we know that U.S. attorneys have a tremendous amount of discretion, right, to not just obviously enforce our laws, but there's sentencing laws, though, when they were mandatory, it's like you don't have a lot of flexibility. So we're trying to move away from that to say give the judges the discretion to make the decisions about sentences based upon the individuals that appear before them and all of the issues that come with it, rather than here's this cookie cutter, no matter all of the different circumstances, this person gets 5 or 10 years.
Absolutely.
So what would you say, and you know, what's your perspective on this discretion in U.S. attorneys potentially enforcing, again, low-level crimes, which is something that we really moved away from?
Well, let me first say that luckily, only a small percentage of the criminal justice system is in the federal system.
Yeah. So
that means for all of these issues we're talking about, there's still a lot that can be done at the state level, and that's really encouraging. And also, as you mentioned, this Congress has been much more bipartisan on these issues. So I'm optimistic at the very least that we won't see real slide back on the congressional level. I just worry that we won't see as much progress as we might like. But as far as this issue you're raising, I think that what was really great was that Eric Holder said to the U.S. attorneys, instead of just charging the highest thing you can, take a look at the individual and see if in most circumstances you can move away from where the judge has to impose a sentence, allowing that judge to have that flexibility. I mean, we've seen New York for years has had mandatory minimums, and we saw the problems. There were stories all over the place about the damage that they cause, where judges and others recognize that this is not the best thing for the individual, but they still impose it. And it's quite possible that the incoming administration might decide we need to return to where we were before, and that we know how harmful that is.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's pretty scary.
Me too.
And
Absolutely.
the reason why I think it's scary in particular is because, remember, during the Clinton administration, that was when there was a lot of money that was funneled to the states. So even though there was bipartisan support to a certain extent, there was money funneled to the states to kind of like build prisons when a Democrat was in office.
For sure.
Also to do away with college prison program, which is something I want to move to now, because the Obama administration decided that because there was evidence to support this idea that if you get an education inside, you can transform your life, be a productive citizen, not end up going back to prison. So what I would ask Abdul is, that's something that we would not want to, again, just say, we're going to do it and then say yes. We thought about it under the Obama administration. Now we decided we're not going to go in that particular direction.
Right.
Is that something that scares you?
Very much so. Very much so. The thing is, there's a lot of good people out there who are taking a look at the criminal justice system as it has existed in this country over the years. There's a lot of policy that clearly shows that this track that we've been on has created a mass incarceration. We have to find ways to fix it. Studies have shown that education in prison, educating people who are formerly incarcerated, has a significant impact on the issue of recidivism, coming back and forth to prison. If we want to move away from mass incarceration, if we want to really, really make people whole again, if we really, really want to make people upstanding citizens again and address the issue of successful reentry, why are we moving away from policies that we know that work? Why would we move away from policies that we know that work? We know education in prison absolutely helps. The cost factors may come into play, but if you look at the cost of keeping a person incarcerated for years, it far outweighs the cost of educating a person. And recidivism rate is extremely, extremely high. So why are we moving away from that? I think we have to just stay the course on this one. I think education of incarcerated people, it's just a tool in the toolbox. It's not the fix, the general, all in all. A lot of other issues have to be addressed. But I think we have to stay the course on that. And I don't know, with this new administration coming in, where they're going to go in that direction.
Yeah, because actually the Obama administration found a loophole that would allow for people in prison to get an education because of the impasse that was happening in Congress. It wasn't going to get passed through legislation, so Obama found this loophole. The loophole could easily be closed now. There are, I believe, 12,000 or so people that are supposed to benefit from the Second Chance, like Pell program. So Sebastian, what's your opinion on that? Because that could just be a signature that says this program is now null and void.
So I'm not a total expert on this, I'll be honest, but so I'd have to look into whether it can be just done by the signature of a pen or whether it would require a process. There's been a lot of talk recently about how changing regulation is a slow process, so hopefully that might not be a focus, but absolutely, as was said, this has been an incredibly successful program. As it is, the program that Obama was able to put in place is only a pilot. We hope it could create some evidence to show. I mean, we already have the evidence. It is overwhelming how successful these programs are, but just adding to that evidence can never hurt, right? So it would be great if this got to move forward. We have no idea, obviously, what's going to happen. And we've seen in New York how controversial education for people who are incarcerated is. It's insane because we know that how well it works, but it's seen as a competition between who's getting free education or not. And that's obviously a horrible lens to look at it through.
Of course.
But so I think we need to move away from that language and that rhetoric, but we also need to acknowledge just how successful these are and it achieves the public safety goals we all want.
Yeah, the point that you made about it being a horrible lens, I would just have to echo that. Because if you only see the fact that a person is getting a free education while they're in prison, it's like, well, a lot of individuals ended up at least partly in the predicament they're in because they had weak education, low educational attainment. So that's also often a consideration.
And that's the scary part, because if you're talking about changing policy, but you're not really, really familiar, you're just looking at it on a surface level. Okay, they're getting this free education. Like Sebastian said, you're looking at it just through that lens. You don't see the long-term impact that this is having or the benefits that it's having. And if you're not looking at it from the perspective of the benefits of it, and you just going with a gut reaction, and Donald Trump sometimes talks about his gut reaction to things. That's the thing that's kind of like, a little troubling. Are you going to go in your gut, or are you going to look deep into the policy and see if it's beneficial or not before we take action on it?
Well, the other thing I wanted to add is just that it's actually inaccurate to say people who are incarcerated are getting a free education that people on the outside are not getting. These opportunities actually exist for everyone. So I think that's a false lens. It's easy to twist how it looks, but the reality is Pell and TAP in New York are programs that people who are both incarcerated and not get the same advantages from.
Because Pell and TAP are about income.
Exactly.
If you're low income, and you can't be lower income than if you're inside. So
Absolutely.
So what about ban the box? We know that that's a policy that has been adopted in jurisdictions all around the country, and under the Obama administration, he actually said we need to move in that direction. So federal jobs, taking the question off the box, taking the question about criminal history off the application to,
Yeah.
again, level the playing field. How might that change now? Because there's a question about that being something that is an advantage to workers. And that was a position that was of interest to Obama.
Definitely.
Now under this next administration, there's a
Definitely.
question about workers and whether or not workers' rights is going to be something that is at the
Yeah.
top of someone's agenda. So, I mean, before we, like off camera, we were talking about how some policies take time to be implemented. So this might be something that is really low threshold, really low scale, and there's some larger issues that might be pushed much more quickly.
Yeah.
So what's your take, Sebastian?
I mean, I that's the first thing, and the other thing, of course, is back to what I was saying earlier about the federal government is a small component in all this, and there's only, the administration cannot affect what's going on the state and local level, where we've seen a lot of movement in this area, and we hopefully we'll see more. I think as more places see the effect. And it's been widespread, but it's also been limited up to a certain point. But we've seen it both in blue and red jurisdictions too, to the extent we use that terminology. Sure. And so, I do worry. I worry that these are programs that we strongly believe at least open that door. No one's saying that you have to hire somebody just because who has a criminal record. We're just saying let that person compete fairly. Take a look at them for real, and don't just write them off immediately because they have a criminal record. And that's all that we're talking about here.
Yeah, and as you said, there has been a coalescing around this issue no matter where you come from on the political spectrum.
Absolutely.
Because in fairness, if you've served your time, then you should get an opportunity to be able to work. So Abdul,
and actually that's actually to all of our benefits.
That's to all of our benefits, actually.
Absolutely.
I mean, you would be, as Abdul was saying, someone who has a stake in your community, and you're paying taxes and so forth. So,
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
Abdul, what do you say about this issue related to ban the box?
I think I have to echo what you just mentioned. We are, an American family, and if someone within our society does something wrong and they are arrested and sentenced and processed and they serve their debt to society, at that point, is it over or is it not? If it's not over, and then it's really a life sentence, because what you're doing is you're punishing these people over and over and over again for the rest of their lives for mistakes sometimes they made at 16, 17 years old. Like in my offense was at 16 years old. I was processed at 17. I was convicted at 18. So, but for the rest of my life in this society, that's what they do. They make you pay over and over and over. You forever have to check that box. And a lot of times if you check that box, what it does is creates this impression of the person who's evaluating you that you're not fit for this particular job. And many times you're the most fit because you're the most desperate, you understand, to really change your life around. You're the most desperate to really, really make a difference and a contribution to society. But after the door is closed on you over and over and over again, because people won't even give you a chance, it's disheartening, it's frustrating. And that's an issue that has to be addressed. And I think ban the box is just one, again, tool in the toolbox to hopefully address that issue. With this administration coming in, I hope they support this issue too, because I think it benefits, as y'all both said, the total of society.
I mean, you served 12 and a half years and came home after that, and we know there's a minority of individuals that can achieve the type of success that you have achieved. You're a lawyer, right? Which means you had to go to law school, which means you had to pass the bar, and you're teaching right now on the collegiate level. We want to show that the more opportunity that people get, the more success stories like yours are possible. I mean, someone continuing to go through the system oftentimes has to do with limited opportunities.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we have like 2 minutes or so left. What are your closing remarks to the audience regarding Sebastian? What we should be looking out for on the landscape regarding criminal justice reform.
Well, again, I just want to return to what I said earlier of the total uncertainty. We have no idea what's going to happen. They have not been very clear about what their goals are. The new administration has not been very clear. And I do feel the optimism, not optimism at least, that things can't get returned to where they were because Congress is changed attitude towards criminal justice reform. We had bipartisan support for criminal justice reform, especially in the Senate. So those things I don't see changing. I don't see a return in that sense. But I worry because of the lack of uncertainty. We don't know where this administration wants to go. And the rhetoric has not been the sort of rhetoric we would like. It's been very much this law and order rhetoric.
Exactly.
And we have people in this administration who have not openly embraced the cause we're talking about here. So everything we talked about, as well as some other issues, we didn't get onto things like private prisons or militarization of the police. There's all sorts of other issues that are going on, and I don't know what's going to happen. I'm hopeful, but yeah, we have to be monitoring, and we have to, if we start seeing things, we obviously have to be speaking up and trying to make sure that they don't go through.
Yeah, and as Abdul said, we got to keep the pedal to the metal. Abdul,
Yeah.
closing remarks from you?
I'll just reiterate that. We have to be vigilant. We have to watch what's really going on. This is not a time not to be involved. This is not a time not to be informed because a lot of things are going down. And if we're not informed, we can be run over. And the thing is, just like Obama had Obamacare or, the Affordable Care Act, it came, but guess what? President-elect said when he come in, it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
What else is gone? With the stroke of a pen, some things are going to be gone. So in all of our interests, we as an American family, we have to all be vigilant and watch what's really going on and watch these policies and watch what's coming down the line because it could be adverse impact on all of us if we're not careful.
Thank you. Thank you, Abdul. Thank you, Sebastian, for being on both sides of the bars.
Thank you.
And thank you, Sebastian again, Solomon, Abdul, Lloyd Bay for joining us on both sides of the bars today. And thank you in TV Land for joining us as well. If you're interested in finding out more about the Fortune Society, please check us out on the web at fortunesociety.org or on Facebook by typing in the Fortune Society. This is Ronald Day as we critically look at both sides of the bars. Thank you, fellas.